and I'm going to read
It's time for Straight Talk Live with renowned radio pioneer Edna Parrish, the television show and podcast dedicated to presenting thought-provoking issues and opinions with the goal of challenging listeners to re-examine their assumptions and expand their opinions and give thought to new ideas and concepts to better their lives and the lives of others. This is your opportunity to participate in making the world better. So without further ado, let's get ready for Straight Talk Live with your host, Edna Parrish.
Oh, hello. I'm Edna Parrish, host for today's show. Welcome to Straight Talk Live, Issues and Opinions. We continue our series on the Combs, the Hogg, Olinger, and Cornett Family History Chat. We started in February. It is now March, and more than likely, because we have so much information to share, we're going to April. Hopefully you'll stay with us. Today's show, we bring together cousins, two cousins whose fathers are brothers. We have with us today cousin Lenora Combs. And Lenora, we welcome you to the show today. Welcome, Lenora.
Well,
and we have her first cousin, Dr. James E. Combs Jr. Welcome, James.
Thank you.
So they're both my first cousins. So my mom and their dads were brothers and sisters, part of a Combs family clan of 10 children, and that those 10 children were very important to one another. And each one of those children did something unique as far as their careers are concerned. Some became educators, some became police officers, some of the children became hairdressers. Many of them, again, were teachers. Some went into the military. Some of them were mothers and wives, all important to what we're talking about today. And we're going to go through that family legacy. And we're going to keep on pushing forward, because we push forward, we build each other up. And that is the most important thing. I've been putting in the advertisement for the show. Have you often asked yourself, I wish I had asked my mom and dad more about the family? Or some may say, well, I know all about our family, but do you know about how the Combs family, the Olinger family, the Cornett family, and the Hogg family connect? Were they all cousins? Did they intermarry? We don't know, but some of our guests today, Lenora Combs or Shell, and Jimmy Combs, may be able to solve some of the mysteries that we have. So sit tight, relax, and enjoy the program today. You are here for a big treat. Now, Lenora, your dad was the oldest brother in the family, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Oldest father.
Mm-hmm.
There was dad in the family as well. Let's talk about your father, John Combs, or John Willie, as they called him. Mm-hmm. Who was John Willie, and what was his rank in the family of 10 children?
Well, I have an interview that was done with my father that I would like to read some of that for you, and that will explain a lot about John Combs. And in his interview, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, dear.
Okay, in his interview, he says that my grandparents settled here in Hazard. They came here as slaves. My paternal great-grandfather was a man named Peter Hogg. His son, John, that's my grandfather. Well, Peter was a slave and John was a slave also. I can't tell you the exact date, but it goes back before 1860. He had 11 brothers and sisters. My grandfather did. They were reared and lived up there in Cody in Knott County, and we call it Breedings Creek. Since black people at that time usually took the names of their slave owner, my great paternal grandfather was owned by a hog. My grandfather was sold, and I guess he was owned by a Combs. And therefore, they took the Combs name, basically, to get back to my great grandfather, then I would be a Hogg instead of a Combs. John's wife was Louisa Francis. Her mother and father were Lancaster and Rachel. Lancaster was owned by the Francises. I don't know who Rachel belongs to, but she took the name of Francis. My grandmother, Louisa, had 6 brothers and 3 sisters. They were slaves when they were sold out of the family. There was Bill Combs that was sold to someone in Moorhead. That's my grandfather's brother. Then there was a Jim Hogg. He was sold to somebody in Hazel Green. Then Simon Hogg remained in Cody, as well as Willie Combs. There is no record of the others. This information was obtained from my grandfather. My great grandfather came out of North Carolina. I don't know what part, but my grandfather and grandmother had 13 children. I'm going to name the ones that I knew personally. And a lot of these names, Jimmy, you'll know also. They were all free. There was Elizabeth Combs, James Combs, Casablanca Combs, Simon Benjamin Combs. That was my father. That's John Willie's father. There was Arminta Combs, Burnham Walter Combs, George Castle Combs. Ones that I did not know were William Boyd Combs, John Henry Combs, Mary Ellen, Dickie Combs, Marva R. Combs. I just assumed they died at an early age because this was after 1914. This was 3 generations that were raised in Knott County. Breeden Creek is what we call it. Then he says that the third cousins were not considered kin up in Breeden Creek when I came along. In Breeden Creek, Kentucky, it was hard to find someone that was not kin to you. You take the Combses, the Cornetts, and the Olingers, and you run into a lot of double cousins, second and third cousins, and some triple cousins. At the old regular Baptist church, they were sort of archaic. They had church outside because they didn't have a building. What they would do is they would clear the space with among the trees, and then they would have church there. He says that I used to chauffeur white people over into Virginia to their church over in Grundy, Virginia. We would stay 3 or 4 nights continually praying and singing. Brother George Higgins was one of the black leaders of the old regular Baptist church. I don't know exactly when the Combses first came to Breeden Creek. In 1932, my grandpa, John, he was around 80 years old. Now, I do know they still have old regular Baptists in Breeden Creek in Red Fox because I've been to funerals there, and the body stays there, and they sing and pray all night long and eat.
That's a good place to stop right here, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Let's stop right here for a minute. Reminding people that you're listening to Issues and Opinions is Straight Talk Live with Edna Howell Parrish, your host. Cousins Lenora or Sissy Combs and cousin James E. Combs Jr. Now, James, as you heard Sissy talking about her dad, someone interviewed her dad. Now, she's reading in the voice that would have been her dad talking, which is very interesting. Did you learn anything by listening to what she's saying? Did you know any of this?
Quite a bit. That last part especially, they called that sitting up. When the person died, there was no wake, as you see today in a funeral home. The family would be there with the body all night long, and they called that a sitting up.
Amazing. I'm putting a picture up. This is our grandmother, Janie B. Combs, and our grandfather, Simon Combs. Now he was Simon, the father, our grandfather was the son of these two people here, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's so interesting. Do you see any family resemblance? Do you see anyone in our family that looks like Mama Janie? We called her Mama Janie and Papa Simon, or our great grandmother Louisa Francis Combs, or John Combs, or Black John as they called him.
Well, my nephew was here earlier today trying to help me to send some pictures, and he said we all got those big ears. He said I know
Okay,
Daddy
okay.
used to always say we had big ears because we were smart.
Yeah.
Well, Jimmy, I can tell my son. He always wants to know, Mommy, where do we get these big ears from? I can
Right.
say from that's part of that Combs Hogg legacy, the
Yeah.
smart big ears. Okay. I'm going to let you continue, Sissy, with your story.
Oh,
She's
okay.
reading in the voice of her father, the late John Willie Combs, educator, entrepreneur, a really important man in his time in Hazard, Kentucky, where they were born and raised. Go ahead.
Okay. On my mother's side, my great great grandfather was Jack Combs. My mother was Janie Combs. That was the picture you just saw. The father of my great great grandfather was Jack. He was his mother's master's child. My mother's father was Billy Combs, the Lick Branch Combs. See, I have Combses on both sides. My mother's mother was Charity Olinger. The Olingers came in from Virginia. They could not own land over there near Wise and Big Stone Gap and Norton, Virginia. And this was just after the Civil War. They heard that you could get land over here in Kentucky. Blacks could buy property in Kentucky. They came here as free blacks. The Olingers discovered the Jack Combs set was already here because the Combses were the first people in Hazard to own slaves. They were Combs's grandpa. Jack is off of that branch somehow. When the railroad came to town, it brought an influx of people from the South, and their names used to be common: the Towns, the Joe Brown Sr., and Elmore Poor. These were people that we called way away from here, down in Atlanta, Georgia, and Mississippi. The influx of people came after World War I when all the coal mining occurred. They got workers from Tennessee, Alabama, and the other southern states where they had a lot of experienced people. Black people in the South were getting a lot of harassment down there, as well as lynching, mob violence, and land taken away from them. Many people came into this area after World War I. There were also people infiltrating from other parts of Kentucky, like Leslie County. You had your Cornetts, your Walkers, and your Youngs and Doziers. They came before the war. And now this might be a good point to take a break, Edna, because he goes on to tell about when he was born and when the first train came and the smallpox and the typhoid and all that.
That's a great story, great history. So the people that they imported from the South were asked to come into Hazard, Kentucky because they needed coal miners.
Right.
And so when they brought these people in on the railroad, which was the first time the railroad had come to Hazard, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Big deal. Was that a big deal?
Oh, yes, that was a very big deal. And my father, in this interview, he also says that his mother, Mama Janie, was pregnant with Aunt Winnie at the time. And they were at the railroad track because a lot of the people that came in on that train, they always stayed with her because she had a big house, and they stayed there first before they got their jobs and started working, and she would feed them and take care of them. And my grandmother, well, Daddy's mother, my grandmother, she was very political. So if they wanted the black vote, that the white man usually came to her and talked to her about it.
And that's what I understand. And I didn't realize that this is our grandmother, Mama Janie, very political, as you say. Back in the day, Republican was what a lot of Black people were, because the Republican Party was quite different than it is today. So if they needed to get the vote out or get someone elected, they went to Mama Janie.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
true.
understand that, yep. Now, Papa Simon, who is our grandfather with her, and understand that he worked also as a sheriff in Hazard, Kentucky. Jimmy,
That's
you're in law
correct.
enforcement. Is that probably where you got
Right.
some of your influences from?
Very much so. Yes, he's
That's right.
deputy sheriff of Hazard, Kentucky.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They had
Wow.
in Hazard at the time. They had Black John Combs and a white John Combs, and Black John Combs was the sheriff for the blacks.
Mhm.
So our grandfather was a sheriff for the Black folks in Hazard, Kentucky.
Yes.
Okay, so Jimmy, I know you work for Dayton DPD.
Mhm.
How many others in our family are involved in law enforcement, and how do you think that Papa Simon's influence affected them?
I think it was a direct influence. Uncle Lionel, who was my father and Uncle Johnny's youngest brother, was a police officer, detective for Dayton. Uh, David Fox, first cousin, was a police officer with Dayton. My sister Celestine Combs Holman was a Dayton police officer. Um, we have cousins that are a little, maybe second and third cousins that were Ohio State troopers. My first cousin, Victor Combs, who is Shell's youngest brother, was a Texas State trooper. And so it goes on and on and on. Very direct influence and a proud legacy that we all took part in. And in our family, I guess what I would say is the law enforcement and education were the two leading professions in our family.
And I don't think, Sissy or Lenora, I don't think that was just by happenstance that your dad became an educator. Something about that profession really influenced him. Uh, can you think of the others in our family that that are educators today? So many
Well,
more.
I'm a retired educator. I taught for 21 years. I'm trying to
Anybody
think.
else in your family?
Uncle James was an educator. Jimmy's father.
Yes.
I'm trying to think who else in the family.
Aunt Edith.
Aunt Edith.
Aunt Edith was a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then
And
it
then
went on to,
my sister Josephine, her sister was her daughter Katrina. She was a teacher, but now she's a principal.
Right. Yes.
Mitzi Fox.
Mitzi.
Teacher, principal, Missy Sanders now. Principal teacher, Dayton, Ohio. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's education, law enforcement, public service is all ingrained in our family. Let's talk more about your father's interview. You're having his voice. Someone interviewed him back in the 1980s, early 80s. And so Lenora is reading from that interview, and we're opening it up. Our chat line is open. If you have a comment or question, be sure to check in with the chat, and we'll let you make your comments as well. Continue, Lenora.
Okay. And Dad says I was very sickly. I was the last person to have smallpox. I caught smallpox, and I can remember my nose was just like a big sore. The pox marks are still in my nose. This was about the year 1921 or 22. I hadn't started school yet. During this time, people were dying like flies. My mother had been a milkmaid in her life and she had smallpox, and she was able to go with the doctor when he would go to visit people. They had what I would call a smallpox house up there in Big Bottom in the area where they had a clinic. She would carry food in and take care of them. They always said she was the one that brought me the smallpox. But I also had an uncle that lived in the house, and he had the smallpox too. the this is just me talking. Dad had smallpox and typhoid fever. He was very sickly when he was young, but he had an uncle, Dr. Britt Combs, and Dr. Britt took care of them. And when they had an influx with the flu, Dr. Britt used a homemade remedy using moonshine and honey, and he cured the black people. But a lot of the black people died, and eventually the whites started coming to him also. And they only had one black dentist. And Dad said he came to his school one time and brought toothbrush samples to the kids. And back in those days, Dad said that toothpaste, it was powder. So I guess they mixed the toothpaste with the water. And I'm gonna go ahead and read a little bit more. Dad says,
Well, can I interrupt you right there? Can I just interrupt you right? Because I thought that was interesting. Your dad had smallpox and typhoid fever.
At different times. He was very sickly, very sickly when he was young.
And so so Mama Janie took care of the people that had typhoid and smallpox. And they had a house that people went to.
And they called it the smallpox house. Because back in those days, Dad said that normally when you have smallpox, they take you out of the house because they don't want other people to get it. But he said he also had an uncle that lived there that had it.
I'm going to say this because back in the day, my mom and her sisters, Jimmy, your mom might have did this too, and Sissy, your mom, Aunt Florence, might have did this too. If we got measles, if we got chicken pox or any childhood disease, this is before you had to take the inoculations for that. My mother would call Aunt Bobby and say, the girls got the measles. And Bobby would say, well, I'm bringing my kids over. So they would let the kids come over, catch the measles or catch the chicken pox. And then they would treat it at home with some kind of remedy, something they pulled out of the garden because everybody could get it and get over it. Now, that's kind of sound like what they learned that from their mother. I don't know if it makes sense today. We got this measles epidemic going on. I wouldn't recommend it. I'm not saying it, but it's really interesting what they did back in the day. And Dr. Britt, their uncle, first black doctor in Hazard, by the way, had a remedy using whiskey and honey to kill the typhoid. Oh, amazing.
Moonshine.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Moonshine. Yeah. We all know that. Jimmy, you smiling because I think you probably had some of that moonshine, right?
Probably did.
But back in the day. Oh, yeah. You and my son probably, y'all make y'all little trips down the Hazard.
That's right.
Okay. I just wanted to add that in. Go ahead, Sissy.
Okay. I'm going to read a little bit about his education now. It says that children were sent away from home to go to high school. They had to go to Frankfurt or Knoxville. They had stopped sending black children to Berea during that time. The other place they sent blacks was Lincoln Ridge and Nicholasville. I was too poor to go there. The blacks formed a committee and went to the superintendent of the Board of Education in Hazard. They decided to start a freshman class at the grade school. I was in the 8th grade. My first experience with high school, I was still in the 8th grade, but I watched Professor Walker teach them algebra, and I learned how to do algebra a little bit too. The next year after I graduated, they put the school upstairs in the stone building that we called the hole in the wall. It had a Masonic lodge that met upstairs, and we took over that. It had a Masonic lodge that met upstairs, and we took over that. This black man, Fred Combs, he built it. They had a restaurant downstairs and a rooming house in the middle with the high school on the 3rd floor. The first black teacher there was a man named James Drummer. He was from Winchester, Kentucky. He had a degree from Howard University. I went to school there one year, and the next year I went to school at Vico. Professor Prier was one of my teachers. This was Higgins High School. It was named after my grandfather on my mother's side, George Higgins. He gave them the property. The Rosenwald Foundation and the county, they built that school in Vico. It was a 2-year school. This was in the middle of the Depression. The school was supposed to help pay my way up there, but they never did get around to it. So my father and I, through working part time by chauffeuring an old white man named Bill Welsh, he was a swift meat salesman. I would work half a day and go to school for the other half. I went to Vico my last 3 years. My first
And I think Shell's got some technical difficulties where she's got stuck here. Hopefully, we didn't lose her. But really quickly, I wanted to get back to Combs in law enforcement and in education. I wanted to say that Byron Fox is a FBI agent and a direct link to our great grandfather Simon B. Combs. Also, in terms of education, my son has got his PhD, Dr. Dominic Combs. His wife is a PhD, Danielle Combs. My wife, Phyllis Combs, she's got her doctorate, and so do I. We also, I think Shell mentioned Katrina Primus. She was an educator as well as she is now an administrator, a principal. So besides the Combs, we've got Foxes and, folks that are really deep into education.
Indeed.
Right
Now I have a picture up. Describe who these people are in the photograph.
That's my immediate family. My wife, Phyllis, next to me. Below her is my son, Dominic, Dr. Dominic Combs. And next to him is my daughter, Ashley.
Okay, I heard you had a visit this weekend from the family as well.
Yes. My son and daughter-in-law and new grandchild were here with us, and
Okay.
in-laws as well from
Yes.
yes.
So I'm hoping that Lenora will continue to try to get back in, because we can bring her back in the show. So don't think that you're not in. If anybody's listening, just tell Lenora to log back into the show. Let's talk about the influence education had on your son. Your wife also was influenced by education as well. Why do you think so? Why didn't he pick something else or choose something else to go into?
The it was a very prominent profession as we listened to the interview about Uncle John and its inception and link there in Hazard. One of the only professions that blacks could get into in the early part, right around World War II, and as blacks began to move north and seek a profession that would take care of the family and sustain them. And so we weren't allowed to get into a lot of the other outlying professions that you see today. And a very
interesting,
very respected as well. Teaching.
Indeed. So we're waiting on Lenora to get back in. Just log back in, Lenora. We can let you in and you can continue with the show, because I don't want to leave you hanging. I want to hear about what happened and what Uncle John did and how he decided to go to school. So now, as she talked about, they had to go to high school out of town. They couldn't go to school in Hazard. They had to go out of town. Now, when they decided to go to college, your dad and Uncle Jimmy, where did they go to college?
Kentucky State University. That was a major influence in the hills of Hazard and throughout Kentucky for blacks at that time. One of the only universities that did accept blacks. Kentucky State has a long history and still does within our family.
And a lot of our family members did attend Kentucky State University, and today are still proud alumni members of that university. So what did your dad do when he decided to go to teach school. Was that what his only professional choice was, or did you ever ask him about that?
Yes, I did. And again, it was his education was interrupted. So was Uncle John's. They started at Kentucky State and got through their sophomore year. And Uncle Willis as well, who was Mama Janie's brother. And then World War II happened, and they had to postpone their education and go and fight the war. Afterwards, they came back and finished up probably the junior and senior year. But it was broke up with the war, but they came back and made it through the Second World War and came back and finished their education.
Okay, this is a picture of Lenora's father, Uncle John. He's in his military uniform, and this was World War
Two.
Two?
It was World War II.
Wow. So where did they get the money to pay for their college tuition? Working continue while they went to school?
I would think so. And what they had saved from being in the military.
Okay. So did your dad take a long time for him to finish his education?
I think he went right on through. Once the war was over, his last couple of years at Kentucky State, he hit the books, and because education was definitely a part of their mindset and the way that they worked.
Now, you all lived in Hazard, Kentucky. Your dad taught there in Hazard. What school did he teach at? This is your dad on the right-hand side in the light colored jacket.
Right.
And tell us about what is today's dedication in the background is what that says on the board. Tell us about your dad.
Yeah. A lot of, and I'm not sure exactly what schools. I know he did teach elementary. He was a fifth grade teacher. He taught middle school quite well. That was his background. So once I was born in Hazard and a little town called Combs, Kentucky. But we stayed there probably until I was about 1 or 2 and moved to Dayton. And at which time he was working for Jefferson Township Education School District and throughout his career. So that's probably either an old young picture there in Hazard, and afterwards it was Jefferson Township.
Amazing. Wow. So you are a son of an educator. What is your sister? One sister was in the law enforcement, and
Right.
Your sister Deborah, where was she and what did she do?
Yeah, she taught as well, but it wasn't very long. What you're looking at there is Uncle John and his extended family. They're the kids,
Right.
But my older sister Deborah, she taught, but then she also went into security. Celestine, who is right there next to me, she went into Dayton police officer, and then was chief of police out there at the Dayton International Airport, and went on into federal education. Federal law enforcement as head of the airports, various airport security and police departments. Deborah also went to Kentucky State University. Next to her is my youngest sister, Elena. She just kind of worked in various other jobs. My brother right below me, Ronnie Combs, was a packaging engineer. And next to him was my mother, Anna Combs, and my niece, Deani.
Wonderful family. It's always great to look back and see them. And that's how I always remember them, even though they grew up and became adults, all from the pictures that we see and from the family reunions that we all attended together. I am still waiting on Lenora to get back in here. Somebody tell that girl to call us back. Mm-hmm. We're in the middle of the story about Uncle John. I want to hear more of that story as well. So now your mother and your father came from a family of 10 children. And here's a picture of them. Let's start at the end with your dad and then go up.
Oh, that's a wedding. And that's my father on the far right, James Combs. And next to him is Uncle Johnny, John Willie. Next to him, going to the left, is my uncle Lionel Combs. First cousin right there is going to be Philip Combs. He's the son of Christine. That was his wedding, as a matter of fact. There's Christine Combs, and next to her is my Aunt Bobby, your mother, Aunt Edna, and finally there on the left is Aunt Edith. They're all brothers and sisters, and Philip was probably the oldest nephew.
Right. So missing from there was Uncle Paul.
Uncle Paul.
Paul Combs and Aunt Charity.
Yes.
So and Aunt Winnie is not there.
There you
so it was 10 of them. I tell you, the mighty 10, I guess. the talented 10, they all came with something good. Amazing. You know, I think that sometimes when we stop and think about our families and what we've all done, we learn by sharing with one another. Sometimes our parents told us stories and some didn't. Have you really given your children the story about the Combs family, and do they know about their ancestry? And has your son and your daughter, have they found out about their ancestry of their mates?
Yes, I would say so. Definitely, with me telling them about our family, about the Combses, and very proud legacy and history, and so they have that ingrained, and it's propelled them forward in the life right now, and so that's one thing that is an anchor.
How are our family? I know that we didn't prepare to talk about this part of it, but I know there's land in our family. I tell people that one of the chats we had before about making sure they secure all their property deeds and understanding all that. And from early on, my mother always told me as a story about, where our family owned land. We all had a child's part. And how did all that come about?
Well, from my understanding, the land was a number of acres on the side of a mountain in Kentucky, and it was used to buy our family members out of slavery, or at least the mineral rights to that land. So that's been a issue within our family for years. So we still own land in Kentucky, and that's been kind of a mainstay in where over in Hazard. So it continues on today.
Okay, so from the grandparents and the great grandparents, and they owned it. I guess they inherited a lot of the land as well. When someone was in the military, and then someone's inherited land, and so it's how many acres? 95 acres of land.
It was at least that amount, more, yeah.
At least that amount. So all the 10 children in our parents' family, they had a child's part. Then the other children that Uncle Cassie had, and then they all had children. Burnham Combs, the brother, they all had parts. So they had it parceled out and done right, because today, still in the family, and different ones have sold their land, and some have kept it, some have bought from other people. But it's been amazing to see how that is in the family, and it stayed there as well.
Yes.
Lenora Combs, I see her trying to pop in. Come on in, Lenora. We can get you in, girl. There she is. Oh, hi.
Right.
She's back.
I don't know
We
what
try to keep
happened
it. We try to. It's technical issues that are.
I promise I didn't do anything.
No, I know you did. I know you did not. That's what happens. We had these tornadoes going on, and the atmospheric things and technical things that happen with Spectrum Company and my internet system. So we don't let technical things stop us. As I said in the information, the flood didn't hurt Noah. It didn't stop him, and the Red Sea parting didn't stop Moses, and the cross didn't stop Jesus. So here we are with this podcast with the family chat, the Combs, the Olinger, the Cornett, the Hoggs, family history chat. And we've been carrying on without you, but now we're going to let you continue. And you're going to continue with the interview that a lady in Hazard, Kentucky did with your father, John W. Combs, back in the 1980s. And so you're reading from that interview using your voice as your father's voice.
Mhm.
So when we left off, we want you to pick up from there and continue. Lenora Combs,
Okay.
we call her Sissy.
Okay. I think I was talking about the education. I'm gonna go back to this is important. It says I went to school there 1 year, and the next year I went to school at Vico. Professor Prier was one of my teachers. This was Higgins High School. It was named after my grandfather on my mother's side, George Higgins. He gave the property to them to build the school. The Rosenwald Foundation and the county, Perry County, they built that school in Vico. It was a 2 year school. This was in the middle of the Depression. The city was supposed to help pay my way up there, but they never did get around to it. So my father and I, through working part time by chauffeuring an old white fellow named Bill Welsh, that was a Swift meat salesman. I would work half a day and go to school for half a day. I went to Vico, and my last 3 years, my first trip out of the mountains was driving this salesman. And we also traveled with our basketball team to tournaments. I think you have a picture of the basketball team. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's Fessa Prier, and that's my dad in the third one from the left. And there's some other family members in there, but I won't go into all that. Okay, it was a 2 year school that specialized in producing. I think I skipped something. I went to Vico, and my last 3 years, my trip out of town was driving this salesman. I also traveled with the basketball team to tournaments. We had a team every year in the Mountain District. I finished my senior year in 1933, but I stayed until 1934 so that I could play basketball. There was a 2 year lapse because I still could not afford school. I got a job as a bellhop at the Hibbler Hotel in 1934 and 35. In the fall of 1935, I was accepted into the West Kentucky Industrial College in Paducah, Kentucky. It was a 2 year school that specialized in producing teachers. A teacher getting 64 hours here was the same as they received in Frankfurt. I went 2 years there and came back into Hazard and started teaching at Browns Fork. That's Town Mountain. That was in 1937. I had about 65 students, grade 1 through 8. Oh my goodness. This is where I got my experience. I taught there for 2 years from 1937 through 1939. After that, I taught 2 years at Lynette Grade School, but during that time, I was going to college every spring at Kentucky State University. And now he's going to talk a little about when he went on into the war. He said next World War II came, and I went into the service in 1942 and was discharged November 1945. I spent 3 years overseas in the South Pacific. I started home in August. My father was seriously ill with cancer, and I received an emergency furlough. I had signed up for an R&R with the promise to spend 2 more years. In the meantime, they dropped the first atomic bomb, and soon the second atomic bomb dropped. I was in the middle of the ocean trying to get home. He says, as a non-commissioned officer in 1943, I was accepted as a candidate for a commissioned officer candidate school, or they call it the OCS. I had developed a heart condition after completing 11 of 13 weeks and was put on a limited service. I got married in 1943 before I went back overseas. I married Florence Brown in January. I served with the only black combat division at the time, the 93rd Infantry Division. They called us island hoppers. We would go from one island to the next and clean it up. After I came back home, I think I missed teaching school. So I started teaching school at Mem Haskin in Kodak, Kentucky from 1946 to 1962. After that, I started teaching at R.W. Combs Elementary in 1962 to about 1975. That was my first experience ever teaching with somebody else. We had about 25 teachers up there, and I was the only black one in the integrated school. At Mim Haskin, I was the only teacher. It was a one-room school with about 3 to 7 children in each class. I had about 30 students. The grades were 1 through 8. I met several people in Mim Haskins who became longtime friends. I lived down here in Hazard while I was teaching up in Mim Haskins. I rode a bus until I could afford a car. My brother James Combs taught at Breeding Creek, and we'd ride up and he let me off at Vico, and I would walk on up to Mim Haskin. I did this for about 2 or 3 years. I walked in and out of that holler every day. I taught the Combs children first, then Miss Alberta, O.C. Hopkins, Will Jones, Arlie Adams, Kimbrough family, and the Lige Baker families. Just a whole new group of people at Mim Haskins, and their families became my friends. We used to have fun during the Christmas holidays and Easter. I sent a group of students out after Christmas one day, and I came on home. The next morning, when I went to school, people had all been out looking for those boys. They took out all the coal miners and everybody out of the house. And they was all up in the hills looking for those boys because they got lost. They were concerned because one of them named Zeke Watson, he gone home and got a gun. He got a shotgun, and that was not in the deal. You see, we'd already been in the hills and spotted the tree. I just sent them back to get the tree. So they just made an adventure of it and spent the night. And then I put a little bit in here. I remember when I was young, I was real little before I started school because I had to go to an integrated school. I couldn't go to the black school. And I would go with Daddy sometimes. And I remember when those children got in trouble, they wore those overalls with suspender-like things. And Daddy would grab them by those suspenders and hold them up in the air and turn them up with that wooden paddle. I never will forget that. He goes on to say, we used to hunt for walnuts and pawpaw nuts just for the fun of it. As far as black and white relations, things were okay, but everything was separate. The principal of the white school was my friend, and we were fishing buddies. He was Grant Rourke, and when I went to the integrated school, that's R.W. Combs, I worked under him for about 10 years. He was my principal. In Mim Haskins, relations were very good. We never had any fights. Of course, the boys, they had to show off and throw rocks to protect themselves and make themselves look big. You had to be tough and able to defend yourself, the boys and the girls. Rourke and I would put our kids out there to catch the crawdads and the minnows together, and we'd stand there and talk. That's where, and this is my little part, that's where my brother Booney used to get it from. JW, he never went to Hazard without a fishing pole. And he was always hunting those, we call them minnows and crawdads, but the people in Texas, they eat it. They call it a delicacy. It was pathetic because we didn't have a lot of doctors, but he said earlier, we had Dr. Britt, and he was a very good doctor, and they had one dentist. And he goes on to tell about how he cured the flu. And he says that the blacks had four out of 5 restaurants belong to the black people in Hazard. Used to be a lot of black businesses. I don't think we have maybe one guy that barbecues. Other than that, we don't have any. But that's the end of his interview.
All right.
Amazing. Great story. So what's going to happen with that story? You got to produce a video, a movie, or got to do something with it?
Well, actually, I have a lot of information of my father's that I've been accumulating over the years. And my intention was to write a book, but I haven't stopped traveling long enough or slowed down enough to do that. But that's my intention one day, hopefully, before I die. But we have a museum that we're creating in Hazard, and they're naming a part of the museum after my father. I mean, it's a museum and a library. And we're going to I'm putting a lot of this information in the museum for people to see.
Mm-hmm.
So the Southeast Kentucky African American Museum and Cultural Center in Hazard is going to be named after your father.
One of the libraries.
one of
in
the
the museum.
libraries.
Hmm. Yes.
In your father's time, did he ever write a book?
I don't think he did, but he's a lot of people have interviewed Dad. I have another interview that a white guy from the newspaper did with Dad about his experience in the Army. And one of the things he asked Dad was why he never left Hazard. And he said he wanted to leave a legacy to stay back and help the blacks in the mountains with education. And a lot of people, Dad didn't tell us that, but I knew a lot of people couldn't read. So they would bring important documents to my father, and he always did the income taxes. They trusted him, and he would read the documents for them and help them to let them know what they needed to do.
It's an interesting story about an African American man who taught white and black children in the Appalachian coal mining towns of Hazard, Kentucky, in and around the mountains and the foothills. And everybody respected your dad. They loved him, in fact.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing. 10 children in that family. Most of them migrated north, beginning, I think, right after the war. A couple of our aunts, I think, came to Dayton, Ohio, and worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay.
Was it Aunt Chris, I think, came, and Aunt Edith, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, then was it, who else? They all started coming to Ohio, finding jobs. I know my dad, we moved, now when I was born in Hazard, but we moved to Ohio when I was about 4 years old. My dad said he just couldn't stand working in the coal mines anymore. I'm a coal miner's daughter. That's right.
Uh-huh.
And so, he moved, and his mom and his sister, they all moved to Dayton, and he got a job in a foundry. And so then Aunt Bobby came and her children, and then Uncle Paul was already traveling. He was in the military. And then when did your family come, Jimmy?
Oh, we came probably around 1960. So I was born in
1960.
Mm-hmm. And we began,
and your mom, go ahead.
My mom was a nurse, and so her and my father began to get things together. And again, he worked initially for Jefferson Township, and we kind of stayed on out there.
Amazing. Now, interesting too, Sissy, your mom was she a nurse as well?
Yes, she was. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes. I'm starting to look at this puzzle here. I'm seeing some things come together.
Uh-huh. And I didn't mention myself, but I was an educator. I taught in Hazard, the only black in the whole county of Perry County, and I taught for 10 years before I came to Lexington to teach. And I taught here for 12 years, and I'm now retired and I'm traveling.
Okay, wonderful. Now let's just a picture of your family. Let's talk about your Uncle John in the bathrobe. That's your dad. And then your mom next to her, Aunt Florence. And your mom was a nurse too. Let's talk about some of your other brothers and sisters as well.
Well, go to the left at the top, my sister Mary in the green, Mary Walker. And then my baby brother, Victor Combs. And my brother, Felix Combs. Felix was in the military also. Vic was a state trooper. My sister was in the accounting and keyboarding computer. And my sister Monica, she worked at the post office. My sister Josephine was a nurse in Florida. And then that's me in the yellow hat. And my brother John Combs, Booney was a teacher for a while. And then he went on to the State Department to work with the State Department. And sitting there on the couch eating is Vic's wife, Dorothy. And then on the left at the bottom is my sister Josie's son, Jason. My sister Mary's son, TJ. Vic's son, Damon. And Josie's son, she's now a principal, Katrina. And that's when we were going on a family. We were going on a family trip to the Bahamas. we still try to get together once a year and we all take a trip together.
You certainly do. And you all were very active, involved in family reunion organization. How important has that family reunion been to the Combs family over the years?
I think it's been very important. And we've sort of gotten away from it with the COVID and that type thing. But the young people need us to do that again so that they can continue to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Consistently, I believe we probably would be in the 55th biannual Combs family reunion, something like that. But then when COVID happened, things were kind of put on hold because, we couldn't get together. This is a picture of one of our family reunions. I think we were in Dayton, Jimmy. You shared that with us. I see your mother on the end in the striped shirt. Let's talk about this picture and how important the family reunions have been to you and your family.
Well, it's been really critical, just seeing everyone and keeping those relationships strong. It's nothing like knowing all your first cousins because they're like brothers and sisters. If I was doing something wrong, if adults weren't around, it'd be your older cousins that get you right. So just a learning process as you grow with the relationships that we had. And you can't replace that today. It's critical that we know each other and have relationships with each other.
Indeed. But many of our cousins today, I think almost, what generation are you in, Jimmy? Are you a Gen Xer or what are you? I'm a baby boomer myself.
Yeah, I am too. Yes.
Are you really?
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Sissy? Are you a boomer?
Yeah.
But some of our younger family members, many of them don't know their cousins. I know. I see, Jimmy, your mom on the end here in the striped sweater at the end. That's Aunt Anna. Your sister Celestine is next to her.
Right.
Back in the red shirt, that's my sister Joyce.
Right.
I think next to Joyce is your brother Jimmy.
Ronnie. That's Ronnie.
Ronnie. Yeah, Ronnie. And I'm not sure
who
that is. But
next to him.
That's who?
Daryl.
Oh, Daryl Combs. Yeah, and that's Judy.
Mm-hmm.
Judy Porter. And then I see I see me down here on the end in the navy blue shirt on the second row.
Right.
That's back in the day. Our cousin Ann, Aunt Edith, and then I think that's Elena.
That's Elena.
My mom there with the afro and Aunt Bobby. Yeah. So, but these pictures are really important as we start to think about our reunions. This year, like I said, we hadn't had a reunion in several years because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But one of our younger cousins, Kelly Hughes, decided we were going to have a Combs Christmas party.
Okay.
And so we had the Combs Christmas party. It was wonderful. I went. We had a good time. So it kind of revived that spirit of familyness and that we had. But still, a lot of cousins don't know each other. We passed on the street. I went to high school with some of the Combs cousins. And I didn't know they were my cousins. I knew they had the name Combs.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody's asking me, are y'all related to Puffy? I said, I believe so. But
unfortunately, right now.
Well, but I don't remember the exact how it is. So we had somebody looking that up, but we are related.
I can tell you how we're related. Burnham Combs. Uncle Cassie's brother, Burnham Combs.
Yes.
That's how Puff Daddy's related. That's his grandfather.
Uncle Cassie is Puffy's grandfather?
No, it's Burnham.
Burnham is and Burnham is Crystal White's grandfather. Mm-hmm. Kenneth Combs is her father. They're my mom. Kenneth's my mom's second cousin. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, cousin Puff, we praying for you, brother. We praying for you. All right. That's interesting thought there. Okay, we'll have to get some more information on that one there. Well, Jimmy, let's talk a little bit more about you. You did a great job on that interview, Sissy. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about you and your history and your education and your background and some of the things that you've done. You've been in law enforcement. You've been an educator.
Yes.
Philanthropist.
Yes. Yeah.
Got a
So
presidential award. Let's talk about that.
yeah, I have come along. I mean, I followed the first footstep of law enforcement initially, and retired in 2012 from the Dayton Police Department. But I had also taught criminal justice and public safety during that time. I've got my teaching license in career tech education, and from there went on and at the present doing intervention specialist, where I help kids with their bringing up their grade levels in math and English language and those type of things. I've gone on and got my master's in education and my principal's license, and recently got my PhD. And so I've written several books, that have kind of a direct link to that background. I'll hold one of them up. This one's called Footprints of Abuse. This is kind of giving an opportunity to examine some of the things that we see in our children from some of the abuse that takes place. And we see this cycle that takes place within the family, and it's good to helpful for us to recognize that. Another book that I've written is Developing a Parent Plan. It's important for parents to have that go on where they are actually working for the success of their children. And it's even more important if your children has a disability. If your child has a disability, it's critical that you are involved with education, or at least education teachers and those that provide for that child in terms of their learning. Instead of just letting someone write a plan, you need to be actively involved. One of the books written by my wife is called Why Am I Angry? I read this at the school that I am currently working at to the whole school because we have quite a few students that come to school with baggage and just anger for nothing. And they need to learn how to channel that so that they're successful as they approach their adulthood. And of course, I do a lot of cooking. So I wrote a book called Jimmy O's Cookbook. Yeah.
Oh, Jimmy O.
Yes, that's my fraternity name.
What's the O stand for?
Omega.
What is the O? I'm
Omega.
sorry, repeat that.
Omega.
Oh, Omega. Would I have not known Omega Sci-Fi? Yeah. Okay. All right then. Recently I got a copy of your father's barbecue sauce recipe from back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know who put that out. Your dad, everybody wanted that recipe.
Yes. Yeah, you have to experiment with a little bit to get it just right.
Right. So I heard you're a good master chef barbecuer.
Yeah, I do my best. I've got a lot of folks that enjoy it when I do cook.
And it's amazing that you all released that recipe because everybody wanted it back in the day. My mother talked about it a lot too. So I have that coveted recipe if anybody'd like to have a copy of it. Comment from Joyce Keith. She said, "Great show, everybody." Hello. That's my sister, Joyce Keith. She always supports us as well. We really appreciate that. Anybody that has any comments, before the show ends, we'd like for you to check in and let us know that you're enjoying the show. What you think about the family chat. I went online to Crystal Combs, who is, I guess Crystal is a third cousin. And it's interesting, Lenora, when you said that in Hazard, the Combs, the Cornett, the Hoggs, and the Olingers, when it came down to third cousins didn't matter and they could marry. They got married. Is that what the rule was?
Everybody was kin. Even today, I have a friend that we go to the senior center and exercise 3 days a week. And we ride together, and we were talking one day, and we were talking about Houston Hogg. He passed not too long ago. He was we say he was a famous ball player over at UK. And she was saying, that's her cousin. I said, that's my cousin. I said, wait a minute now. We must be kin. Now, she's a Gibson, but that's by marriage. But her mother comes to find out her mother from down mountain is kin to the Combs. And so I tell you, you start talking to people, just about everybody down here from Hazard is kin.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Yes, Houston Hogg, a football player, amazing. And so we, like you said, we would have been Hoggs instead of Combses if the Combs didn't change the name. And I asked you, do you think they didn't like the name Hogg because of its relationship to our pork chop family animals, or because they just didn't want that enslaver's name?
Maybe not. But, it was 7 white Combses that started Hazard, the city of Hazard. Mm-hmm. And, when they sell the slaves, whoever they sold the slave to, they took on their name. So that possibly could have happened too.
That is so interesting. So now we're trying to get some more people to join the chat. Everybody want to know more about the Olingers, because I have friends people I have met, and they start asking me, well, how do you know Janetta Warren? Janetta's my first cousin. Our moms were sisters. What? Mm-hmm. Well, that's how my family got here to Dayton, Ohio from Kentucky, because Aunt Virgie, she said, Aunt Virgie brought us up here. I said, Aunt Virgie? I said, well, that's my grandmother's sister was Aunt Virgie. And she says, really? I said, that's my mother's middle name is Virgie. You know how everybody, they give the names, they get repeated quite a bit. And then we've discovered that we're cousins. So where did the Olingers come from? Well, I'm looking for some people that can give me some more Olinger history for our family chat. Another family I was looking for more was the Cornetts. So somebody called and said, well, I didn't hear about the Cornetts. Well, guess what, folks? I got the Cornett family legacy coming up on the show. I met online Herbert Cornett on Facebook, and they had the Cornett family reunion coming up August the 1st this year in Montgomery, Alabama. And Herbert Cornett is going to break it down when he comes on the show and break down the Cornett history of how we're connected. Because I remember cousin Kenneth Combs said at the reunion, we're both Combs and we're Cornetts. We're all the same. And I'm like, well, how did that happen? My mom, she always said she didn't know. She never wanted to tell us the real truth about stuff. Now the sisters would get together and talk, but she never wanted to talk about that. And then there's the Walker family, because that's in your family, is some of the members Mary Walkers. And I know they're not related, though. I know, right. They're not related, right? Okay, you don't have to tell it. It's okay. But I'm looking forward to the Cornett family reunion. President Herbert Cornett coming on the show very soon. So stick around for that one. And then more of the Combs family as well. So we got the white Combs, the black Combs, the yellow Combs. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because we talk like this because we want other family members. You may be a Jackson or a Johnson or a Smith, but are you all connected in some way? And are you all telling your children the stories? Because we're losing generational stories, and they're so important. I don't want to leave this earth without having had an impact on my family. I've been doing this broadcasting and radio stuff for over 50 years now. And I don't want to leave my family without knowing. And so we have the Combs Family Reunion website that people can go to and check it out and learn more about who our family members are. This is information about the Combs Family Reunion website. And you can learn about the information that our family would have. You can contact me as well if you want to go on the website and look for the Combs Family Reunion at the Combs Family Reunion, myevent.com. I think I began to created this website back in the reunion of 2010 or 2011, I forget. But we hadn't had anything in social media with that. So that was why I wanted to make that impact. So that reunion website is still up at the Combs Family Reunion, myevent.com. So I've taken that responsibility to do it. And then since I happen to be able to talk a lot, and I like talking. I do these. I'm starting to do these chats, so you just need to make sure that you get your family together and go online and start doing more on. Go to Facebook and check some of the stuff out in history. So don't stop. Will you stop because we're stopping the show, or Lenora, will you not do it anymore?
Oh no, I like I told you, I'm going to work on my book.
Okay, work on your book. You're gonna put back on stage. This is history right here. This is Louisa Francis Combs, John Combs, aka Black John, our great grandparents.
One of the things I want to say is you see the resemblance. One of the things I've always looked for is and been told about is our eyebrows. You know, that's a trait that we get from him.
What was that again?
Our eyebrows, very thick eyebrows.
Oh, eyebrows. Okay. Well, I didn't get the thick eyebrows. I must have got that from my father's side, which is a different family. And I heard you mention a name, Sissy, that you were taught when you were reading about people that came who had different last names. Did you mention the name Poor, Poor?
No, I don't remember.
Or was it? Okay, it seemed like I heard that because that was my father's name, but I know their family came from McGoffin County and Breathitt County over on the other side. So that's where they came from, on the other side of the mountain.
On my mother's side, my mother's people, her mother came from Breathitt County. In Pambo, in Jackson, Kentucky, Breathitt County. And she was part Indian. My grandmother was. And then her mother.
And that's where
they were all from Jackson, Breathitt County, on that side on my mother's side.
Jackson is where my father grew up, partly in Jackson with his Aunt Lily Mae Collins and Uncle Ernie. And Aunt Lily was other, probably Melungeon or either white, black, maybe just white. I don't know, but his mom was white. They were all mixed up. Uncle Ed, who was was from Jackson. That's Aunt Charity's husband, and who was a good friend of my dad's, even though they married sisters. You know, they were good friends as well. So it's all mixed up down there in Shuckabeen Holler. That's what it's, Jackson. I remember going there as a little kid, Shuckabeen Holler, and they lived on the side of the mountain. So it's amazing to remember all that. Some good times as well. We want to thank everybody before we go for joining us in the show. Again, showing our grandparents. Again,
you are Shell.
Mama Janie B. Combs, the woman who they went to in Kentucky when they wanted to get someone elected. Janie was a big Republican. My dad said Mama Janie carried a gun in her apron pocket all the time.
She did. She did.
I told my father said,
Edna, my sister, Mary Walker, she told me to tell you my name is Shell, not Sissy. Her name is Sissy.
Girl, I get y'all mixed up. See, now you know which one of us look alike. I always got.
They say we look alike.
I know. I remember that. I'm so sorry. You know, I get y'all mixed up, so I apologize.
Okay.
But my dad said when him and my mom went to get married, and I guess they went to the Justice of the Peace. He said Mama Janie had a gun in her apron pocket.
She probably did.
I know she did. And then there's our grandfather, Papa Simon Combs. And Simon Combs was a sheriff for the black folks in Hazard.
Yeah.
Amazing. What's that show that used to come on TV with the sheriff? And okay, I'm not gonna bring that up. But anyway, that's another story for another day. Coming up next week, Dukes of Hazzard. Well, yeah, the Dukes of Hazzard, you know that. And Black Gold. And do they still have the Black Gold Festival in Hazard?
Yeah. In September, first week.
And Black Gold was the coal down there in Hazard, Kentucky. And my mom went to see the Dukes of Hazzard when they were down there. Luke Duke and Bo Duke. I tell you, those were the good old days, I guess, for them. Next week, we're going to have on, I know, cousin Byron Fox checked in with me today. Another cousin, Daryl Harrison. And then and coming up soon, we're going to have our other cousin, Herbert. Herbert Cornett from the Cornett reunion, family reunion, coming up this summer, August the 1st in Montgomery, Alabama. So we'll have that on. I want to thank you guys for being on the show and bear with me through all these technical issues that we've had. But I've had a good time, and I have really enjoyed talking with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Okay, and don't let the technicalities fool you or scare you, because it is what it is. It's all about having the fun. And Jimmy, we want to talk about, we didn't talk about your presidential award. Let's talk about that before we leave.
Yeah, the wife and I, Dr. Phyllis Combs, received the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Presidential Award from our university, and just basically enjoying that here recently.
Okay, that was in 2023 Lifetime Achievement Award for you and your work in philanthropic work, and also your work in education and just being a community servant. You're as an author and a writer. Want to get some more information about the books. I want to have your wife on to talk about her book. Was it Why Am I Angry?
Yes.
Okay, and that's regarding children and this whole issue, because I work with kindergarten children, and I know they do come to school very angry, and they throw a fit. They can throw a fit. I really want to talk about that as well. I'd like to hear from her on that as well. So, guys, we're going to be leaving you, and we hope that you don't forget us. Come back and join us in the show for another time. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Edna Parrish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Straight Talk Live with renowned radio pioneer Edna Howell Parrish, the program dedicated to presenting thought-provoking issues and opinions with the goal of challenging listeners to re-examine their assumptions and expand their opinions and give thought to new ideas and concepts to better their lives and the lives of others. Join us next week for another opportunity to participate in making the world better. So until next week, live your best life from your friends at Straight Talk Live and host Edna Howell Parrish.